Hello friends, welcome back to our YouTube channel Best Online Medical Lectures. In the last video, we have discussed about the epidemiology and clinical manifestation of the dengue fever. Today, we will discuss about the management of the dengue fever. Okay, how we will manage. So, this topic we will study under this following headings, that is, first we will study about the assessment, how to assess the condition of a patient, then the diagnosis, how to diagnose the dengue fever, and finally the proper management, that is the treatment part, what treatment will give for the dengue fever patients. Okay, so we'll have a stepwise approach for the management of the dengue fever. So the step one will be the overall assessment of the patient. So this overall assessment of the patient includes taking of the proper history, which include the information of the symptoms and the past medical and family history, then physical examination including the physical and mental assessment, and investigation including the routine laboratory investigation and dengue specific investigation. So this is the step one, that is the assessment of the patient. Then comes the step two, that is the diagnosis, assessment of the disease phase and severity, and finally the step 3 is the management part, which includes the disease notification and the management decision depending upon the clinical manifestation of the patient. So based on the clinical condition of a patient, we divide the patients into three groups: group A, group B and group C. Okay, we'll discuss in detail about these various groups and how to manage these various groups. Okay, so the step one, so first is the history taking. So whenever a suspected patient of a dengue comes, or any fever, most likely to be dengue, so we have to ascertain dengue specific history, which includes date of onset of fever or illness, that is the fever or illness is since how many days, then quantity of the oral intake, whether the person or a patient is taking the oral fluids or the oral food properly or not, then assessment for the warning signs. Okay, we'll discuss what are the warning signs of the dengue in this lecture itself. Then is the patient is suffering from diarrhea, or is there any change of the mental state like seizure or dizziness, and most importantly we should ask about the history of the urine output, that is the frequency, volume and time of the last voiding. Okay, if the patient is not voiding frequently, at least they should void once in 6 hours. Then other important or relevant history like family and neighborhood history we are supposed to ask. Okay, this is about the history. Then we are supposed to do the physical examination. So we have to stress more about the physical examination on the assessment of the mental state, whether the patient is drowsy or awake, and assessment of the hydration status, that is how much is the fluid status we should assess. Then assessment of the hemodynamic status like the blood pressure, pulse or pulse pressure. Then checking for any tachypnea, that is increase in the respiratory rate, then or is there any acidotic breathing or pleural effusion. Then checking for the abdominal tenderness, or there is the enlarged liver, that is hepatomegaly, or if there is any ascites, that is accumulation of the fluid in the abdominal cavity. And specifically we have to see for any maculopapular rash, which indicates any bleeding manifestation, which is one of the complication of the dengue fever, that is dengue hemorrhagic fever. For that, tourniquet test is applied. So tourniquet test, basically what it is done is the blood pressure tourniquet, that is the blood pressure cuff, it is tied on the arm, and the pressure is raised in between the systolic and diastolic blood pressure for 5 minutes. So after 5 minutes of the pressure, if in a area of around 1 square inch, if there are more than 20 petechial hemorrhages seen, like red type rashes are seen more than 20, then it's a typical it is a positive tourniquet test, that is it indicates that there is a internal bleeding, that is basically in the dengue hemorrhagic fever and dengue shock syndrome, due to the increased permeability from the blood vessels, there is leakage of the fluid. Okay, so this we have to see in the general physical examination or the specific examination. Then investigations, lab investigations. So after history and examination, This lab investigations can be general lab investigations as well as the dengue specific lab investigations. So what are the general lab investigations? So generally for any disease we just do the routine blood investigations like complete blood picture. So here complete blood picture like hemoglobin, RBC, WBCs, platelets and the hematocrit. So in the early phases the hematocrit level will be at the baseline, but when the disease progresses to the dengue hemorrhagic fever, that is the next stage, due to the plasma leakage, this there will be hemo concentration, that is hematocrit value will be raised up. Now what is this hematocrit? So hematocrit is the percentage of the RBC in the whole blood, that is the ratio of the total RBC to the total whole blood. Okay, so generally in adults it is around 45%. So there will be heme concentration and hematocrit rises as the disease advances. Then decreasing WBC count, generally the WBC count will be in a range of 4,000 to 11,000 cells per cubic millimeter. So if there is a specific history of fever and there is a decrease in the WBC, then dengue is very much likely in a dengue endemic area or whenever there is an outbreak of that. Then you can see there is an increase in the lymphocytes due to the immune response, then decreasing platelet count. So this is one of the diagnostic thing here. Like there will be decrease in the platelet count and simultaneously there will be rise in the hematocrit compared to the baseline. So it indicates that the disease is in the progression to the clinical critical phase. Okay, so classically we see the thrombocytopenia, that is decrease in the platelet count. So normal platelet count will be around 1.5 to 4 lakh cells per cubic millimeter of the blood. So it will be less than the normal. Now one question arises, why there will be decreased platelet count? So there are many such reasons. One of the reason is because of the molecular mimicry, that is the antibodies against this dengue virus protein, especially the non-structural protein of dengue, non-structural protein 1 will cross-react with the platelet surface proteins and there is destruction of the platelets. Again, one more reason could be this dengue antigens or even the immune response antibodies will destroy the bone marrow cells. Okay, so the production of, in general, all the cells will be reduced, so then the platelet count will be less. Okay, then other investigations like chest x-ray, ultrasound of the abdomen. So in the chest x-ray it can be there, if at all if there is any signs of pleural effusion can be seen. Ultrasound abdomen, we can check for the ascites or edematous gallbladder. In addition to that, specific chronic conditions like diabetes or other chronic ill health, the specific tests like blood sugar, serum electrolyte, liver function test, kidney function test and bicarbonate and lactates can be done. Okay, so these are the general investigations. Now the investigations to detect the dengue virus infection, that is the dengue specific investigations. So the dengue specific tests are direct methods and indirect methods. So direct methods will detect the dengue virus or dengue virus antigen. So it includes virus isolation, genome detection and non-structural protein 1 detection. Okay, so these are the dengue specific direct methods. Okay, but the accessibility of this test is less as compared to the indirect test, but the confidence level will be more, that is these are more diagnostic. Then indirect methods. So indirect methods, here we detect the antibodies, that is the serology, antibodies to the dengue virus antigen or dengue virus itself. So the antibodies like IgM and IgG is detected and that will detect the dengue virus. So you can see this is the timeline of the illness, okay, on this axis. So number of days of the illness, and on that particular days which test will be positive or reactive. So in the first 5 days you can see there can be viremia can be seen, which can be detected in the serum by RT-PCR assay, or non-structural protein 1 which can be detected in the serum by the ELISA or rapid tests, okay, from 1 to 7 days. Then the antibodies will appear typically after 5 to 7 days, IgM, then IgG in the secondary infection, and IgG of the primary infection will appear after 7 to 8 days. Okay, now what are the recommended diagnostic tool according to the laboratory services level? Okay, so as this specific test, that is direct or indirect tests, whether they are available everywhere, that is at the primary healthcare center, district healthcare center and reference center. So generally this direct test, that is virus isolation and genome detection and non-structural antigen protein 1 antigen detection, generally they are routinely not found at primary health center. They are these are the higher tests done at the tertiary level or the reference centers. So in the primary health centers we can see this NS1 antigen detection by the rapid test kits are available. Okay, then the indirect test, that is the antibodies IgM and IgG. Okay, again this all tests, rapid tests are available at the primary healthcare centers, and district healthcare centers rapid test and ELISAs are available, and the remaining tests like immune assays and the neutralization assays are usually done in the reference centers only. Now, how to confirm whether the particular patient is definitely or 100% suffering from the dengue virus infection? So we have tests to confirm the diagnosis, that is the confirmed dengue infection, and the test which indicate the probable dengue infection. So let's see what are the tests which will confirm the dengue infection as we discuss the specific test. So this direct virus isolation, genome detection, antigen detection. Okay, so the sample collected for them is the serum sample from the first 1 to 5 days of the fever, or the necropsy or the autopsy tissues. Okay, so in the blood sample during the first 5 days of the fever, if these things are positive, that is virus is isolated and by positive RT-PCR test genome detection of the dengue virus is done, or this antigen positive and non-structural 1 protein antigen is seen, then it's almost confirmatory. Along with this IgM and IgG seroconversion means here that 2 samples are taken, that is acute sample and convalescent sample. Acute sample means during the first 5th day of the fever, 1 to 5 days, and the convalescent serum, that is from 15 to 21 days after the first serum. So initially if it is negative, and after 15 to 21 days if becomes positive, then it is also confirmatory. Similarly with the IgG seroconversion. Okay, this is the confirmation, and the probable diagnosis by the other, only the single serum IgM IgG is positive, that is the probable diagnosis. Now step 2 in diagnosis is, after confirming, we have to ask these questions: is it a dengue? Okay, then if we confirm yes, it is a dengue infection, then if so, which phase it is in. If you remember, in the last video we have discussed the different phases of the dengue fever, that is simple dengue fever, then that is classical dengue fever, then dengue hemorrhagic fever, dengue shock syndrome, and severe form of the organ failure. Okay, so all these levels we have seen in the last video. So in which phase the patient it is, and if there is any warning signs, and what is the hydration status, because the main pathogenesis is in the dengue hemorrhagic fever or dengue shock syndrome is there is a leakage of the plasma from the blood vessels because of the increased permeability of the blood vessels. The pathogenesis part we have discussed already in the last class, and about the hemodynamic status and admission criteria, that is which patients we need to admit and which patients we need to send back to home, that is which can be managed on OPD basis, and we have, based on that we have to categorize the patients into proper groups for the proper management. Okay, so this is the second step. So now we have to see certain parameters to make out whether the patient is stable, or the patient is in compensated shock, or the patient is in hypotensive shock. Okay, so if the patient is stable, then they will be clear and lucid. If there is a compensatory shock, still there will be this one, but in hypotensive shock the change in the mental state, that is the patient will become drowsy or irritable. Then capillary refill time. So if the patient is stable, it is less than 2 seconds, whereas it will be prolonged in compensated shock and very much prolonged in hypotensive shock. Capillary refill time means whenever we press an capillary, then there will be pale thing. So when immediately within 2 seconds it will the paleness will go, whereas in this shock it will take much time. Then extremities. So extremities, when the patient is stem, it will be warm and pink, that is the normal body temperature. But if there is internal bleeding or internal there is a fluid loss, then the peripheries will become cool. Okay, then peripheral pulse volume should be good volume if the patient is stable. It will be weak and 3D and further feeble or even absent in hypotensive shock. Then heart rate normal. it will be, there will be tachycardia, or there will be severe tachycardia followed by the bradycardia and the fatal shock. Then the blood pressure, one of the important thing here to note down. So blood pressure and the normal pulse pressure will be there for particular age, but if there is a compensatory shock, the systolic blood pressure will be normal, but there will be gradually rise in the diastolic blood pressure, that is the pulse pressure. Pulse pressure means the difference between the systolic and diastolic blood pressure. So this will classically, it will be narrowing as the disease is progressing. So if the pulse pressure is narrowed for less than 20, okay, it is almost diagnostic that there is it is going, the disease progressing to compensatory shock or hypotensive shock. Okay, then also we have to see the respiratory rate, if there is a tachypnea or complications like metabolic acidosis and all is seen. Okay, so this is how we have to assess the patients, and also we have to look for the warning signs. Warning signs, what are the warning signs? That is the simple dengue fever, like most 90 to 95 patients will have just a simple like any viral fever, but only just 5 to 10% of the patients will suffer the complication of dengue hemorrhagic fever and dengue shock fever. So what are the warning signs we should look after, so that that simple dengue fever may turn into the complicated state? So the initial warning signs will be, there will be sudden disappearance of the fever, drop in the platelet count and rise in the hematocrit. If there is a drop in the platelet count and rise in the hematocrit, then there are the 4 criteria for dengue hemorrhagic fever. If there is a consistent fever and there are hemorrhagic manifestations seen, there is excessive capillary permeability, and classically the platelet count is less than 1 lakh cells per cubic millimeter of the blood. Okay, so, and when the patient develop dengue shock syndrome, that is around 3 to 6 days after the onset of the symptom, then it is also one of the, then alarming signals: severe pain in the abdomen, prolonged vomiting, abrupt change from fever to hypothermia, change in the level of consciousness, that is irritability and excessive sleepiness. So these are the certain warning signs. Now, what is the admission criteria, that is to whom we should admit? So there are certain admission criteria. So warning sign we have already discussed. If there is any of the warning sign, then we should admit the patient. Then if there is some signs and symptoms related to hypotension or possible plasma leakage, like there is a dehydrated patient, unable to tolerate the oral fluids, giddiness, postural hypotension, profuse perspiration, fainting, these all are things like cold extremities, or if there is a spontaneous bleeding seen independent of the platelet count. Okay, if the platelet count is also normal, but there is a spontaneous bleeding like epistaxis, like bleeding from the nose, or mucosal bleeding, bleeding in the while vomiting, this all things can be seen. Or there is an organ impairment, it is renal and hepatic functions are compromised, or further there is a rising hematocrit and all of, or there is a coexisting comorbidities. We have to look forward these things. Okay, so based on this criteria, we have to properly management. So come to the third step. After confirming that this is a particular patient of the dengue fever, and after knowing the which phase, whether the patient is in dengue classical dengue fever stage, or in the dengue hemorrhagic fever or dengue shock syndrome fever, then we have to go for, after categorization, proper monitoring and proper treatment. And treatment is mainly the IV fluid administration in the hospitals and the proper management of the complications. So for the proper management, we have to there should be a proper categorization of the patients. So we categorize the patient for the sake of management into 3 groups: Group A, Group B and Group C. So Group A may be sent home. Okay, they can be just simple treatment on the OPD patient, they can be sent home. Group B, they are referred to the inpatient hospital care, and Group C requires the emergency treatment. So let us see which people comes under the Group A. So the criteria is the patients who don't have any warning signs. Okay, they have just a viral fever and all these vital signs are stable, and most importantly, who can tolerate the oral fluids. Okay, they can take the oral fluids, and also the urine passage, that is they are passing normally, that is at least in once every 6 hours, that is oral intake is okay and urine passage is also normal. So such stable patients can be sent home. That patients are considered as Group A. Then the Group B, that is dengue fever. If we are suspecting that they may be progressing to dengue hemorrhagic fever or dengue shock fever, just to monitor them, we admit in the hospital. So patients with any of this following criteria, like coexisting conditions such as the diabetes or extremes of age like infancy or old age or even pregnancy, or even sometimes social circumstances where the patients stay at the living alone or living from the far away from the hospital and difficult to come whenever immediately due to the complications, if at all any complication develop, or if there are existing warning signs like abdominal pain or tenderness, persistent vomiting, clinical fluid accumulation, mucosal bleeding, lethargy, restlessness, liver enlargement by greater than 2 centimeter, and there is a laboratory increase in the hematocrit. So this comes under group B. And finally the group C patient, that is they require the emergency treatment. So patients with any of the following, that is they have a severe plasma leakage signs and there is a organ failure and severe bleeding and severe organ impairment, for them immediate ICU treatment is required. They comes under group 3. Okay, so on admission, so we monitor the patients. So these are the parameters to be monitored to know the progress of the disease, like body temperature, respiratory rate, heart rate, blood pressure, pulse pressure or pulse volume, capillary refill time, temperature of the extremities, abdominal pain, vomiting and bleeding. Okay, so these are the things. Now let's see the proper management. These 3 groups, group A, group B, group C, what exact treatment we give to them. So group A patient, okay, just they will have a fever, body ache, myalgia and all, and their hydration status is good. So what advice we give? To have a adequate bed rest at home and encourage, especially these patients will be children, so to drink the plenty of fluids even for adults. So the most important advice what we give them is to have a plenty of fluids, because there will be, due to the increased permeability, there is most chances of likeliness of the fluid loss. To avoid that fluid loss or to replace that, let them take the plenty of body fluids like even the juices or even the electrol or ORS can be given. The only treatment we can give is paracetamol, okay, paracetamol or tepid sponging for fever. Okay, so if the fever is not controlled with paracetamol, so with the there should be tepid sponging so that to reduce the fever. But one important thing here is we should avoid the other NSAIDs like ibuprofen and all, because they may aggravate the gastritis and bleeding. So we should just only, the basic treatment is tablet paracetamol, that is the tablet Dolo 650 mg, and proper hydration, the proper fluid. That's all it's needed for the dengue fever. But we should make them aware about the possible warning signs and to get admitted or report to the doctor immediately if they develop any warning signs. Okay, then group B management, to whom we have already admitted. Okay, so these patients are the patients with, there is a suspected plasma leakage. Okay, so first thing is we have to take a reference hematocrit level for fluid therapy. So the main thing of management here is the administration of the IV fluids, preferably crystalloids, they're like 0.9% NaCl or Ringer's lactate. Okay, Ringer's lactate is RL or this simply NS, 0.9% NS. This administration within 24 to 48 hours. So we have to frequently monitor the vital signs and the hematocrit level after administration accordingly. Okay, then the fluid is discontinued when the vitals and hematocrit are stable and urine normal, it is passed by the patient. Okay, these are all things we have to see. So how much fluid to be given admission? Okay, so it should be based on the body weight. So ideally the crystalloid like Ringer's lactate 7 ml per kg per hour to be given, and we have to assess at the first hour the vitals and the hematocrit. If there is improvement, then gradually we have to reduce the dose of the fluids, that is from 7 ml to 5 ml per kg per hour. If further improvement, then can be given to 3 ml, and we can continue for 24 hours and discharge when the patient is stable for 24 to 48 hours. But if there is no improvement, then we have to gradually increase the dose of the fluids, that is RL from 7 to we can increase to 10 ml per kg. Then again we have to assess for after 2 hours. If further there is no improvement, then we can increase the dose to 15 ml. Then again assess at 3 hours. Further, if there is no improvements, then instead of crystalloids we can give colloids. Okay, see these IV fluids can be crystalloids like Ringer's lactate or this one 0.9% sodium chloride. Okay, so colloids are higher molecules like albumins with higher molecular weight, albumins or dextrose or starch. Okay, so colloids can be given to retain the fluid. Colloids like 10 ml per kg per hour. So if there is improvement, again gradually we have to reduce down. But even after colloid, if there is no improvement, then we have to look for any complications like anemia or acidosis. Then we have to think accordingly. Okay, so this is the group B management, basically the IV fluids and antipyretics. Then group C management, that is the emergency patients where they have developed the complication of dengue hemorrhagic fever and dengue shock syndrome because of the plasma leakage. So these patients with shock, severe degree of the shock, so most likely we have to establish 2 IV lines if possible, and again we have to see for hematocrit level. Remember, hematocrit level is very much important for the fluid therapy. So here it includes 2 things: fluid resuscitation and fluid replacement. 2 things are different. Fluid resuscitation is different and fluid replacement. For group B, we generally do fluid replacement. Here we need to do fluid resuscitation because the patient has gone into the severe shock, decrease in the blood pressure. So judicious use of the IV fluid resuscitation is the life-saving and essential one in the intervention of the treatment. Okay, so what is this fluid resuscitation? So fluid resuscitation is a strategy in which large volumes of the fluid, around 10 to 20 ml per kg, are administered for a limited period of time under the close monitoring. Okay, so the goals of the fluid resuscitation includes improving the central and peripheral circulation and also to improve the end organ perfusion. Okay, so remember rule of 20 in dengue, that is so many changes, hemodynamic changes and treatment things, we encounter this number 20. So just see the common things here. Increase in the pulse rate by 20, it indicates dengue. If there is a fall in the blood pressure by 20 mm or fall in the pulse pressure, that is systolic blood pressure minus diastolic blood pressure below 20 millimeter, and if there are more than 20 petechial spots after a tourniquet test, which I already discussed, and needs 20 ml per kg fluid resuscitation in the dengue shock syndrome, that is the rule of 20. Okay, then this is a general algorithm for fluid management of compensated shock in infants and children. So in compensated shock, that is the systolic blood pressure is maintained and signs of reduced perfusion is seen. So we have to start with the isotonic crystalloid 10 to 20 ml per kg per hour for 1 hour. If there is a improvement, then gradually we have to reduce the crystalloid level to 10 ml per kg per hour, then to 7, 5 and 3 ml per kg per hour for next 2 hours and 4 hours respectively. So as the clinical improvement is noted or reduce the fluids accordingly, so we have to stop the fluids after 48 hours. Okay, if there is an improvement. But if there is no improvement, again we have to check the hematocrit level. Remember, hematocrit level monitoring is more important here to assess the IV fluid requirements. So if the hematocrit is high, then we have to start the crystalloid second bolus, or we can even start the colloids 10 to 20 ml per kg per hour. If there is a improvement, then again we have to gradually reduce the dose of the IV fluids. Or if the hematocrit is less, then we can suspect there is a severe bleeding, and we can, if there is severe bleeding is seen, then urgent blood transfusion to be considered. And if there is no overt bleeding, then colloid 10 to 20 ml can be there, and again we have to evaluate and consider the transfusion if there is no improvement. Okay, so this is the algorithm. Then one more is algorithm for fluid management in hypotensive shock in infant, children and adults. So if there is a hypotensive shock, we have to try to obtain a hematocrit level before the fluid resuscitation. Again we have to start with the isotonic crystalloid or colloid. If there is an improvement, again we have to gradually decrease the dose of the IV crystalloid or colloid after 1 hour, that is up to 10 ml per kg per hour. Then again we can reduce it to 5 to 7 or 3 to 5 or 2 to 3. Okay, so as the clinical improvement is there, we have to stop the fluids for after 48 hours. But again, if there is no improvement, we have to check for hematocrit level. If the hematocrit increases, so we have to give either IV crystalloids or colloids second bolus and 10 ml per kg per hour for 30 to 60 minutes. If there is improvement, again same protocol. And if the hematocrit is decreased, again we have to consider for the overt bleeding. If there is a bleeding, then urgent blood transfusion. If there is no bleeding, then again we have to manage with the colloid. Okay, so this is the treatment algorithm. So as we have seen in the treatment algorithm, the hematocrit level monitoring is very much essential. So there we have to interpret the hematocrit value and the vital signs. Okay, so normally the hematocrit in the infants is 30 to 35%, children 35 to 40%, in adults 40 to 45%. So if the hematocrit value is increased and vitals are unstable, So what does it means? It means there is an ongoing plasma leakage and fluid resuscitation to be done. Remember, fluid resuscitation, not fluid replacement. Whereas if the hematocrit is increased and vitals are stable, then it means there is a subsiding of the plasma leakage and just fluid replacement is enough. So this is how we interpret the hematocrit and vitals. And if there is a decrease in the hematocrit and the vitals are unstable, it means there is a occult bleeding and a fresh packed RBC or fresh whole blood transfusion to be done. And if the vitals are stable and hematocrit is less, it indicates there is a hemodilution or intravasation, then we have to stop the fluid. Okay, so this is the interpretation. Now one question is when to stop the IV fluid administration. Okay, so there are certain signs we have to look for the improvement. The signs for cessation of plasma leakage, that is the stable blood pressure, pulse and peripheral perfusions are stable, hematocrit decreases in presence of a good pulse volume, then apyrexia, that is decrease in the that fever comes back to normal without any antipyretic, without any paracetamol for 24 to 48 hours if the fever has come back to the normal, and resolving bowel or abdominal symptoms and improving in the urine output. So if these signs are seen, then we have to stop the IV fluid. Then how to manage the bleeding if at all there is a bleeding is seen. So we have to give a good bed rest to avoid the trauma, avoid NSIDs and intramuscular injections, then give 5 to 10 ml per kg of the fresh packed RBCs or 10 to 20 ml per kg of the fresh whole blood. So even if the bleeding persists, then suspect the disseminated intravascular coagulation. So in DIC we can give fresh frozen plasma or the platelet rich plasma may be considered. So however, there is no role of the prophylactic platelet therapy. So considering the platelet count, so this if it is less than 10,000, then only with bleeding manifestation there is a role of the prophylactic platelet therapy. Okay, this is the management of the. Then how to manage the fluid overload. Sometimes due to excess of fluid management, IV fluid management or IV fluid resuscitation or the IV fluid replacement, there is excess of overload. So we have to assess that if there is excess of overload, then the presence, we have to assess if there is any presence of comorbid conditions like chronic heart disease or renal failure. So we have to suddenly stop the further fluids and supply the oxygen to the patient, and diuretics, oral or IV furosemide 0.1 to 0.5 mg per kg per dose can be given once or twice daily, and continues the infusion. Okay, so these are the things to manage the excess fluid. Then certain natural remedies has been suggested in certain researches like papaya and other coconut oils and the other fruit juices, but still we have to do more research to confirm what is the exact role of this natural remedies for the dengue fever apart from the fluid replacement and the antipyretics. Okay, then as it is said, prevention is better than cure. So how to prevent this disease, because cure, if it is very much fatal, it will be very much difficult to manage the disease. So prevention and control, basically it is transmitted by the Aedes aegypti mosquito, by the bite of the Aedes aegypti mosquito. So we have to try to prevent the breeding places like the stagnant water places where there is a bleeding and all, we have to avoid that. Okay, so if there is a bleed, there is a saying, if there is a breeding of this mosquito you will bleed, that is internal bleeding. So we have to avoid this. The references what we have taken for today's management is WHO guidelines of the dengue fever, and for pediatric management algorithm what we have taken from the IAP textbook of pediatrics and the Ghai Essential Pediatrics. Okay, apart from the K Park of community medicine. Then what are the preventive strategies? So as you know, mosquito is infective throughout for its whole life. That is, once the mosquito has bitten an infected person and acquired the virus inside, so the same mosquito throughout his mosquito's lifespan, they will be infective. They will infect the other persons to whom they bite. Okay, so the preventive measures what we can take is there are many. One is vaccine, but it is no satisfactory vaccines are available. Though vaccines are available, but it's not so much satisfactory. So vaccines is not a good solution. The most important solution is prevention of the breeding places or killing this one mosquitoes by fogging or reduce the mosquito breeding sources like open spaces where water is accumulated. Okay, then we should dengue mosquitoes bite during the daytime, so protect yourself from the bite by the clothings. Okay, the full sleeves clothes to be put. And what are the community activities we can do to control the mosquitoes? So in the indoors we have to check for the stagnant water like flower pots or any coolers or any utensils can be seen, or we can remove the cover from the outdoor water containers. Okay, if there is like a tire or barrel or any containers which is containing the water, we have to remove that, and we have to clean for the environment for the removing breeding sites. Okay, so basically where there is a accumulation or there is a stagnation of the water, we have to remove it. Okay, like covering, disposing the waste in a cover and burying the waste in the soil. So we should make sure that there is no collection of the water in our surrounding neighborhood, and mosquito nets is also one of the better solution for prevention. So dengue prevention possible through community awareness and community active participation be individual household level. Okay, so good neighbors keep the backyards clean and dry. So your surroundings should be clean and there should be no stagnation of the water. So the take home message of the today's management class is dengue hemorrhagic fever is more severe form, and the early recognition and treatment can save the lives, and the patient should be kept under a mosquito net and report to the hospital and notify the health authorities. Okay, so finally one question: when is the National Dengue Day? So it is on the 16th of May. Okay, so finally I would like to give a disclaimer here is, so this video for the management of this dengue fever is mainly made as a education, for the purpose of educational tool. Okay, for the according to the syllabus of the MBBS students in community medicine, internal medicine or even pediatrics. So the management is for the as a education or is a medical lecture for the medical students, which other paramedical or other students can also be benefited, but strictly it's advisable not to look forward this treatment for self treatment, and should not people are not advised to take this treatment without any doctor's advice. Okay, so if you are suffering from dengue fever, please consult your doctor and take care. Okay, thank you very much.